we're just a little bit forward in time by a couple of minutes. So I'd like to first welcome everyone here today for the launch of the Traveller Mental Health Report 2019. And people might want to 2019 and we're in 2021. It's because something hit the world and everything was at a standstill. And that was called COVID-19, which, by the way, we're not out of the woods yet by any means. So I just want to introduce myself. My name is Jim O'Brien and I'm chairperson of the Traveller Mental Health Committee. I want to go through just a little bit of housekeeping because of the health and safety and the restrictions that we all have to follow. So if everyone can either switch off their phone or put it on silent. I want to introduce you to the exits. So we have an exit here and we have the little green man over here. So you see the green man? There's 4 in the room. Yeah, there could be 5. But there's 4 right that I can see. So that's where the fire exits are. Anyone that's going to be coming up, we do have a few speakers. Just mind the step. So people would know the people that are coming up. I don't want anyone. Look, we have HSE people here, just in case. But there's a step there and they might sort of just mind it when they're coming up. Okay, I've got something like 5 to 6 minutes to talk about my journey. Now for people that know me, once I get talking, it's very hard for me to stop. And it's one of the things where I have to control this because I have a time set of anywhere between 30 and 40 minutes. And again, this is all to do with health and safety of keeping people too long in a room. So I'm going to start with something. On the 23rd of November, which is next month, I'll be 28 years of being a traveller activist. Now when I started my journey back on the 23rd of November, and I'm being very precise because that's where I would have started. What I didn't know now, what I know now, is me becoming the first traveller in this county to be an activist. Because I can tell you the landscape back then, you couldn't count them in your hand how many male and female travellers throughout the country were activists. I took that brave decision simply because what I was looking around me, and me being a proud member of the travel community, was travellers trying to solve problems among themselves. The trust wasn't there with other services. Now it was very difficult. I practically had a challenge every day, every second of every day. And I can honestly say now, it was very, very difficult in the landscape back then because travellers weren't working what we would call, the travel community called buffers, which are members of the majority community. So the first thing that I looked at was I had a vision. I had a vision of what was missing very early on in my life when I started. And the vision that I had was the travellers hadn't got a voice for themselves and the travellers hadn't got a base. And they were the 2 areas that I wanted to work on. And my big difficulty then was the barriers that were in front of me, and the barriers are sadly, unfortunately, still there, but not as big as what they were back in 1993 and beyond, was that I had to try and get a premises. I had to try and establish a base. And a local councillor at the time, Pat Vance, some of you might know the name, he's since retired, he had a small little tiny office, and I mean it was so small, it was like a corridor. And he trusted me by going through his shoemaker business, which is on the Florence Road, and that was the birth. That was the birth of Bray Travellers Community Development Group. Back then we were called Bray Travellers Development Network. So I would have already had experience on the topic that we're launching today. Because every single one of us in life, and we go through life, we suffer. But in the travel community it was hidden. There was a big denial. They were either ashamed or too afraid to come out that they had a mental health problem or the lack of understanding. So we're fast forwarding, and I'm really fast forwarding my 28 years because I could keep talking and all of a sudden you might need sort of sleeping bags, but going to do that. Fast forward is something that I wanted to achieve. I thought I was never going to see the day that we are launching such a document. And when people, and it encourages, when people get a chance to look at that document, to a lot of you it's going to shock you. This is the first of its kind for travellers in this county. And I can stand over and justify this document is 100% traveller proof. Now sometimes you get 95, sometimes you get 90. I can tell you, the audience today, that this document is 100%. The travellers engaged. The structures that we have in this county that allowed that and the trust to build up among the travellers. But I have to say also, the last couple of years, the awareness campaign that we all see on our televisions, listen to it on the radios, when travellers hear a professional saying that they have mental health problems, let it be a professional footballer that could be on 300,000 or 400,000 a week, they say, well, what's wrong with that person? Because automatically you're thinking, well, that person is wealthy and it shouldn't. Everyone, no matter what status they come from, they suffer mental health. I have no magic wand in my pocket, but what I have learned is that you listen. It's one of the first steps that you do. You listen, because by listening to a problem, the problem becomes half. And that's something that after today, I can say to you that the massive workload will start on a topic, I go back and say again, I thought was never going to happen, but we're here today. Is that 5 or 6 minutes, or is that?
You're doing all right.
Am I doing okay? The journey for me personally, I can hold my hands up and say, I have suffered mental health in my years of working. People would look at, I've had my own tragedies in my working life. There was always a time where I was going to walk away from what I was doing. And then fast forward to the 10th of March 2015, the Carrickmines tragedy. No one said to me when I started my journey in life, you're going to come across such a big tragedy and how are you going to deal with it. I have to say, I don't know where I had the strength, but I had the strength within, and that's Bray Travellers Community Development Group. Without the people around me, without the good community that we have a solid foundation here in Bray of people working together. And that's what I needed and that's what I got. So there was all them parts of my life that, you look in the mirror and you say, my God, what are you doing? What are you doing? I just kept going because of the community. It was the community kept saying to me, the travellers need that voice. Because back in the day, the pressure was coming down on me because I was individual. Everything about Bray Travellers was Jim O'Brien. I was a judge. I was a doctor. I was a counsellor. But I'm glad to say today that it's not about Jim O'Brien. It's about the people. The pressure is off my shoulders now when I have good staff, good board management, good people around me in the community sector, service provision. Once we communicate and work together on various topics, that's where we'll get results. And that's what we're good at. But for all them years that travellers want opening up about their problems or trying to solve problems among themselves, they won't go anywhere. But we are starting now to see the fruits of that today. Thanks be to God. Okay, I'm going to move on now, if people are happy enough with that.
Yep.
I'm going to invite Kathleen. Kathleen O'Connor is the Assistant Coordinator of the Primary Healthcare Project, and she's going to say a few words about her experience. It's COVID-19. You can't share.
I have to be in the spotlight.
Can everyone hear Kathleen okay?
Yeah. Good morning everyone, my name is Kathleen O'Connor. I'm Assistant Coordinator of the Primary Healthcare Project in Wicklow. I started working when I was 15 before we moved to the building called Yard. We were in Rathnoon. I had to lie about my age and say I was 16 when I wasn't supposed to start. Mommy told me, just tell me you're 16, I was only 50. So now the girls can do that. Like, my girls wouldn't like it. They'd be devastated. But yeah, I was in Shuttlenet for 5 or 6 years working as a weaver. And I got married at 18, had 3 children. My eldest daughter now is 18. And I left because I had the 3 children, of course, and I had to raise the kids. But when my son was 2, I started with Liz O'Brien in the healthcare. My mother was there at the time, and she was the assistant coordinator. So I suppose I didn't realise what mental health was myself. I probably suffered it myself going through teenage years, and I didn't even know because it was never talked about. There was always a big stigma around it, and if anyone had mental health, they were seen as being sick, and it's something that they had to live with for the rest of their lives. So my own mother would have suffered with her mental health, and she would have been in and out of hospital a couple of times years ago when we were really young. And I've noticed with the travelling community that they couldn't even. There's young people out there. There's no one talking about it. It's like this big taboo. No one wants to know. No one wants to. It's just like you just keep that to yourself. Even if they tell the family, it's like a big secret. The family keeps saying you're grand, just pushes them off, and there's so much suicide in the travel community. It's so higher to the general population because of the stigma attached to it. Because if you're talking about mental health in the travel community, that's going to stay with you. You're not getting out from it. People is going to say, well, they're not well, that person's sick, and that's just it. So, but the more we talk about it, and the more that we bring it, like this mental health survey that we done, the more that it comes out there, that there is help out there for the travellers, and we can see how much. I didn't even realise how much help was out there until I started doing this with the primary healthcare. So I've been like, I'm working now as assistant coordinator 3 years. But Liz is the coordinator, I'm the assistant coordinator, and we have 14 workers, as it is, 14 primary healthcare workers. We do the entire county, and I've done a few courses on mental health, about how to speak to people that it has thoughts of suicide or that's just feeling not well. And as teenagers in the travelling community, they don't, like, for instance, I had my niece the other day and she comes into me and little fella comes in behind her and she said to me, he's always down looking, he's only 11, he's always down looking, now he's going to suffer depression in a couple of years, he's always down. And so he left the room and I said to her, I said, you know, I said that he's 11, he's nearly 12, his body is changing, so he's transitioning into a teenager. I said, so you could be a bit more lenient towards him and just try to understand a bit more. She's like, yeah, I never thought of that. But this is where it comes from. It's not even travellers, people don't realise. It's like, if you have a broken arm, we can see it. But when you have a mental health problem, no one sees it. So it's not there. And then there's a lot of, she's only looking for sympathy. There's nothing wrong with her at all. So they're afraid to say that they have a mental health problem. And that's why it's becoming a huge problem. And even this year alone, in the travelling community, it's been on Facebook 4 or 5 times of young people dying by suicide. There was a young travelling girl on just 13 years of age, suicide in the travelling community. So it's a big, it's getting, I think it's even worse now because there's so much more to live up to. Years ago they could hide it, but now it's coming out. And even with young people, with the travelling community, with their sexuality, it's all coming out. People is coming out, they're saying this is who I am, and that's why it's a big problem. So what else can I say about myself? The young people at this day and age are suffering in silence, and they need to be told that they're allowed to speak. They're allowed to go to their GP, they're allowed to ask for help. I think this is a huge thing for the travelling community. I'm delighted to be here today to get the launch. My other daughter done the front cover and she done the inside cover. She's big into art, but she wouldn't get up here now. She has her mask on her, but no one can see her.
Give it time.
So I've come a long ways, and I've seen like that I'm allowed to talk about if I'm not feeling good. Where years ago, like, if I went into my mother years ago, she had 10 children and said, Mammy, I'd be kicked out the door. I thought to go and clean up, wash the mug, wash the window. You know, that's what you'd be taught like. But now I think the parents are listening more to the children, which is a good thing, because of groups like what we have, like primary health care, you know, because we're constantly talking to the people, and we're constantly handing out leaflets about it. And it's easier to talk about. So hopefully in the future there'll be but like it is a problem and it's a big huge issue, but I think we will see more. There's so much help out there for that. It's a disease like any other disease. So if you have another disease, that's the same thing. You have a mental health problem, it's just like anything else. So hopefully in the future that people will just go and get help, and I think by this being launched today, I think it's going to impact the travel community a lot. I think it's just it was a lot of work. We have been at it now for the past couple of years, and then COVID and everything put back, but I think it's going to make a big change to travellers, and it's like, this is what you can do. There is help out there. You don't have to suffer in silence, including myself. Because years ago you'd be just getting on, like you probably go up the road and have your little cry because things get, and it's everywhere. Like it's not just travellers, it's everywhere. It's in the general population. So hopefully now with this here that we will be able to move forward, and that the stigma and the taboo around mental health might change a little bit for the travellers anyway. Hopefully, I think that's me, Jim.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, for that. And I know that came from the heart, very, very passionate. And I just want to pick up on one or two comments. Is that launching such a topic in terms of an ethnic minority group as being the travelling people, it's a start and it's a step in the right direction. And for young people that Kathleen refers to, you know, when I look back, we didn't have the modern technique that young people have today. But when I look at the town of Bray or even Wicklow town, the amount of services that's on the doorstep for people to avail of in all walks of life. Sometimes it's like, if I'm talking to a traveller, it's like, the first few words is like, I'm getting to get 3 buses to Northside Dublin when I'm only asking to go to the street. Do you know what I mean? It's the panic that's setting in, and, you know, will I be accepted? You know, we're always building bridges, you know, but without the services on our doorstep, and that's what Bray has and that's what Wicklow Town has, you know, because when I go back, when I started, they were doing a survey around PAYE in counties among the travelling people. I was only 1% in County Wicklow. I was something like 5 or 6 years in my employment, and that was me. I became a role model straight away. And when I look at it now, it's up to around 26-28% of travellers in employment in this county. So I mean, when children looks at their adults and they're stabilising a job, such as the primary health care, or Let It Be Shuttlelit, or Bray Travellers, Community Development Group, this is all community development sort of related. I'm not saying for 1 second that they're going to be in oil companies or in businesses around like that, but there is hope. And that's the one thing that we're hanging on to. There is hope. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to our next guest. I would like to welcome up our volunteer researcher, which is Donald Costello. Donald has worked in community development since the early 80s, mostly in Ireland, but he spent a couple of years in America. He finished his career spending 14 years working with citizen information in Dublin. Donald will take you through some of the report in terms of its stats and statistics. Thank you very much. What's that?
Yes.
So far, so good.
Hi, I'll take this off now. Hello everybody. We're working with Christy in doing this, so you'll have to excuse us. We've just got our partners to work with this morning, but I think we'll be fine. I do want to take people through the main items. I mean, everyone can read the report and you can make their own minds up as to what sort of things stand out more than others. I'm just picking out a few things that I thought were worth mentioning as a kind of standout items. as I say, there's so many questions in there and so many people involved in it. I suppose the first thing is just to go through the actual survey itself and its distribution. There was actually 133 people took part in it, which is actually very, very high, and it's highly commendable for the people who actually conducted this survey, and also for the fact that there was a 100% response rate. There wasn't 100% response rate on every single question, but everybody filled most of it out, and in fact the majority of people filled all of it out. We got a good age, male-female breakdown, gender breakdown there between 81 and 52, as you can see, and there was also a good age distribution, which meant it meant we got a good sample of age distribution, so that we could draw good conclusions about the differences between how people of different ages answered. The first one there, Christy, if you scroll down there to question 1. Yeah, the first question was an open-ended question. What do you understand by the term mental health? And one thing that struck me immediately when I was trying to put these two together was only 3 people associated mental health with something positive. So it was open-ended, it didn't ask about whether it was negative, but just what do you understand by it. Everybody else, 1 or 2 left it blank, but most people had very, very negative things down. Stress, anxiety, nerves for 36. 48 specifically mentioned depression. 13 mentioned the term sick, and suicide was mentioned, and then you can see the bubbles there. If you scroll down a bit, see there for the bubbles. They're just individual comments that we put in, and only those 3. They're the only 3 positive comments in the 133, and people were allowed to leave more than 1 comment. Feeling good, feeling positive. So there's a terrible negative connotation about mental health. I think that's pretty clear from that. If we could scroll down now to questions, I think it was number 3. I want to look at. Yeah, there we go. What would you consider doing? These are just coping mechanisms. If we just get down to the figures there. Yeah. Again, you can see that quite a high amount actually talked to a doctor. The use of alcohol and drugs, interesting, it's probably the one where there's a huge divergence between male and female. Most of them had some divergence, but nothing that stands out. And that's quite high. Also, talking to a doctor was reasonably high. Talking to a priest or nun. And also, actually, if you scroll down just another little bit down onto the next one, the next question or the next graph. Yeah, just hold it there. It's higher in what those figures we just get it there. In the younger age groups, those last 2 age groups there are the younger age groups. So that, I must say, kind of surprised me, but that is the reality. Younger people still seem to think, like to talk to a priest or a nun, which is, as I say, a little bit surprising. The rest of them are pretty well distributed. A lot looking after animals as well. My next question goes down to number. Actually, could you scroll down to question 5? Yeah, does anyone know anyone who suffered from any of the following? And if we go into the chart there. This is the most alarming and probably the most important part of it, is how high stress, anxiety, and if you go down just another little bit, we go down to depression. They're extremely high. I mean, the actual national figures, some of the national figures don't specifically ask those questions, but they do ask about negative mental health. The national population, 24%, suffer from negative mental health, which would include all of those. And you can see that stress, anxiety, depression are in the 70s or at least in the mid 60s. That to me is the most alarming part of this. report. There's no huge differences, except again, if you can go down, Christy, down to number 5 too, at the very bottom of it. Yeah, you can see depression is surprising because it tends to come out at both ends. The under 25s are 81% and the over 45s are 85%. So, and now it's pretty high in the middle as well, but nonetheless it does come out a little bit at either end, which you mightn't expect. Nonetheless, that's the figure. And as I say, we did get a good cross section, so I think these figures would be very would stand up. The next one that I want to look at is questions 7. We can go down to that. This here are organisations that people have heard of. There's quite a good, sorry, do we have the thing there? Yeah, that one there. There's a high awareness of some organisations, but not of others. And some of the local organisations maybe they wouldn't be as aware of as you might have hoped. But that's something for organisations themselves to look at. It's terms of how to keep the population informed as to what's going on. But generally speaking, there is a pretty good awareness of the, traveller maps is very high, and citizens information, the HSC, but headlamps and rainbows and things like that are called quite low. With not much of a gap there in the different in the different difference between males and females, and also in the age distribution. One question again, and as I was saying, I'm just picking these out. These are ones I picked out as kind of standout ones, but the entire report really, people should read through all the percentages. Because to me they're all very revealing. Question 10 is one that kind of I looked at as well, which it seemed. To know of children's mental health services, only 20% of people said that they would know of any children's mental health services, which again is an awareness I think that needs to be. That's something that needs to be very seriously dealt with. Would you know what to do if you're worried? Sorry, what did I have in there? Sorry, Christy. Would you know what to do if you're worried about for your own or someone else's mental health? The overall answer to that is 50%, which is. You could look at that positively or negatively, but I mean that means 50% wouldn't know what to do if they were suffering from a mental health problem or to lose somebody else, and that again is a very high percentage. And finally, question 12: have you ever been affected by suicide? We can go down to that one there. I mean, they are very alarming statistics. I know again the All Ireland study said that suicide was 6 times more prevalent in the traveller community than it is in the national, and among males it's 7 times the national. They are, along with the figures on depression and stress, to me the standout statistics in this, and shows you what problem it is. And if you just go down to 12.2 there, we get the age distribution, and you can see the last question there about people who had a family member, younger people and older people at either end again. They're the most the most alarming ones. And these figures and the same on depression have been backed up by other reports, other local reports in the likes of Clondalkin and Tala and other places. But also they're backed up by national reports. There's nothing here that we're saying we never knew this before. But it's simply reinforcing it and showing that it is a major problem and it's something that needs to be dealt with. The last few things I want to say, thanks Christy, that was very well, was another open-ended question which came in question 15b. In your opinion, what are the gaps in services for mental health, and is there a specific service you think is needed? Again, 105 people responded to this question, and the ones that came out most were out of our services, and other people just spoke about other services, more mental health centres and mental health services. But the most mentioned gap was out of hours. Now I believe there are some, I don't know what exactly the position is in regards to out of hours. I believe there are some, but just to again draw attention to that fact, this was an open-ended question, so there was no ticking about boxes or anything in this at all. They were just asked, what do you think, and that came out the most. They're the main areas. Another recommendation will be dealt with later. I just want to talk about maybe one last thing which was in the conclusions, and it's already been mentioned by Jim that since this report started, we had COVID. And unfortunately, I mean, COVID, we would assume has had a major impact on the mental health of people. People of all over the country, but there's a lot of reasons to believe it would have specifically bad effect on travellers. I mean, if you look at how people generally cope, I mean, social media was a major fact in the population of coping with this, and you know the lack of access to that would be much higher among the traveller community, and it's something that we intend looking at. Unfortunately, we weren't able to cover it in this report because this was conducted in November, I think it was, or maybe earlier in 2019. It was before this hit and left us all a little bit behind schedule. So I just want to say, you know, thanks to everybody. I got involved in this in early 2020, I think it was, or actually late 2019, and we've had to put up with a lot with COVID. But I just want to say that I really enjoyed working with everybody on it. This report highlights the many problems facing this community. But one thing I found is that there's a tremendous amount of effort, and Jim again has referred to, on behalf of people. Some great services, some great people, really working hard to deal with these problems. And I would just want to say I really enjoyed working with all of you. And if there's any questions later on, I presume there will be, but if there are,
I can certainly open that up.
Yeah, it's right.
Just briefly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're happy now?
Yeah. Great. Thanks.
I just want to make a few comments. Of course, when we've done the stats in the last couple of years, and the connection that we have made with services that everyone, I suppose, is entitled to, but the ones that would have an impact on the travelling community. We've got local maps in Bray. We've got citizen information in Bray, two vital services that everyone depends on. And it was because of our networking and talking about, because I'm sure Wicklow travellers would feel the same, and travellers in Wicklow no different than travellers in Bray. They might have been aware that there was such kind of services, but there was always that maybe an embarrassment or a fear of someone seeing them going into such a service. And that took time. And I would also know and acknowledge that the same would apply in Wicklow Town as well, because Wicklow Travellers has built up that network, and then follow on to the primary healthcare, they would have done the same as well. You shouldn't be ashamed. You shouldn't have a fear to walk into services when you're going through difficulty, simply because what does it affect? It affects your mental health. So that's why we open it up sort of big time. And I was glad to see in that the travellers that were a part of the survey, in a high percentage, that they were able to look at maps to call on, they were able to look at citizen information to call on, simply because Wicklow Travellers, Bray Travellers, primary healthcare, has encouraged and talked to them about breaking the cycle of you don't have to be afraid, you don't have to be ashamed. These services are set up for people that have difficulties. Okay? If I just pause for a couple of minutes, in terms of what Donal has picked out in the synopsis of the report, does anyone have any questions now? They can raise their hand. Any burning question in terms of some of the topics that Donal picked out in the report? No? Silence is gone. Okay, so I'm going to move swiftly on. So, as people can see, the statistics, I said it earlier on, are shocking. And they will shock an awful lot of people once they get into the report themselves. That was only snippets that Donal picked out. But for frontline workers, I'm using that word, not in the HSE term, frontline workers in terms of traveller specific organisations, we're always aware of this. Kathleen has told her passionate story, I've told mine. We've been aware of this for a long, long time, but now we're starting to make the breakthrough. Now the travellers trust the people that are in front of them, and now they're opening up and not bottling up. That's a term that we use in mental health. If you bottle it up, what's it going to do? It's going to make your health status and people around you worse. So in terms of the All-Ireland Health Study in 2010, Donal picked on it there, suicide rates are 7 times higher for men than the national average, 6 times. My personal view in that I think the stats are actually quite higher than the 7%. I think they're up and down the country where there has been a suicide among the travel people, there has been that hidden, where the father and mother could say to the coroner, don't say how my sibling died because they'd be shameful thing to say how they died. And that's where we have a working group that are doing a massive piece of work at the minute, and I'm hoping now in 2022 that they're going to get the true figures. The figures at the minute are, to me personally, because I'm out and about regionally and national, is that it's a lot higher. And that's sad. It's actually a lot higher. And then again for the same in 6 times higher for women, accounting for 11% of all traveller deaths. And that's another sad statistics as well, you know. In 2017, the Traveller Community National Survey launched a survey of just under 500 travellers. I was one of them 500, I'd like you to know. From across the Republic of Ireland, this survey found 90% of travellers agreed that mental health problems are common in the community. 45% of travellers were actively concerned about their own mental health, while 31% were actively concerned about their children's or their family's mental health. 82% of the community had been affected by suicide. I'll say that again, 82%. And 84% at the time of the national survey in 2017 was 84 long-term unemployed. And I don't want to go into all the reasons beyond that because I could keep you short all day. Underemployment, according to the census in 2016, the labour force unemployment rate among the Irish traveller community across the state was 80%. This is fast forwarding it. And the NITRIS references this at 84%. Part of this working group, this independent working group, to bring in all these statistics together and to try and get it the most accurate in percentages, because we're a bit, one group is saying this and one group is saying that. Lack of employment and employment opportunities has a massive impact on the mental health of individuals and their communities. I will look briefly at some of the recommendations. I'm not going to go through all the recommendations, data and recommendations that are important in this document, but I'm just going to go through one or two. Recommendation number 1 is to build awareness of existing mental health services to support the travelling community in activating and responding to the complexities of the local mental health service by targeted initiatives to promote engagement with mainstream services. This can be done by working in partnership to develop a guidance documents and clear pathways to service and support through mental health promotion and education, and by promoting healthy activities and access to mainstream sports. Recommendation 2, it's essential that there will be a development of culturally appropriate services to respond to the mental health needs of travellers through the implementation of cultural complicity training for all staff working within the mental health services. While this is going to take time, a good starting point will be a meeting with the services and staff to build a relationship and trust, which should make this recommendation easier to achieve on all recommendations. Just finally, one more recommendation. Establishment of a working group. It's there. The next step now should be the key stakeholders, which we're hoping is going to develop, to create dialogue around support pathways for travellers in accessing services. The aim is to develop partnership and improve approaches that reflect the needs of the travelling community. Two key areas of advocacy and care plans. We plan to keep the steering group operational, and we invite key people in to discuss potential gaps and solutions. Now I'm going to move on to the launch of this document, of this survey. I would like to introduce Linda Moore, Head of Mental Health Services in Community Healthcare East, to the stage. Sorry. And officially launch the report.
Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Linda Moore. I'm Head of Service for Mental Health Services in Community Healthcare East. On behalf of myself and Martina Quealy, who's the Chief Officer, who unfortunately couldn't be here but does send her regards. We are pleased to and delighted to be launching and to be supporting the launch of this peer-led survey and report. I have had the luxury of reading, I'm just back from leave this morning, but prior to the launch this morning I've had the luxury of being able to read all of this report and the recommendations, and it is quite stark. I think it's to hear, we can't hear these things enough. Suicide, with 42% of survey participants being affected by suicide. We can't hear it enough, because the more we hear it, the more this is somebody's reality. The findings of this report suggest that travellers' mental health is multidimensional and requires a multi-sectoral and integrated approach that addresses the broader determinants of traveller health. Recommendations from this report, such as working to increase understanding and awareness of mental health services, developing accessible information and guidance on care pathways, and working together to achieve better mental health outcomes. These are all key commitments within the Connecting for Life, Reducing Suicide Together service plan for Community Healthcare East. I would like to commend the Community Wicklow Mental Health Steering Group, Bray Travellers Development Group, Wicklow Travellers Group, the DESH Project, the Travellers Counselling Service, Donald Cassidy, who we've heard from this morning, a volunteer external researcher, Community Healthcare East Engagement Lead, we have here this morning, and also our Mental Health Traveller Coordinator, Peter O'Reilly. Can't speak highly enough of all of you, and the Traveller Primary Healthcare Project workers, and all the members of the Traveller community who participated in this survey and spoke honestly and real about their findings on mental health services. I want to thank you all for your hard work in development and guidance of this dedicated report. I am certain that the findings of this report will be useful in supporting the continued development of a more responsive and effective mental health services for the members of the Traveller community. Thank you all very much.
Okay, we're just maybe a minute or two over time, but we're in the final hurdle. So before we get coffee and refreshments, I would like to thank a few people. Sorry. Okay, so I I'd like to thank people. I'm going to start off straight away with the steering group. The progress and the many challenges, and in particular the last 19, 20 months with COVID-19 that we all had to go through, because we were introduced to a new technology which was seeing a person on the screen, and that's cool, and that's Zoom. And then there was Business Centre. We all had to get used to these sort of looking at like robots. It was a new way of working, but it was a safe way of working. So I'd like to thank Liz O'Brien, the coordinator of the Wicklow Primary Healthcare of County Wicklow, Kathleen O'Connor, who you heard this morning, assistant coordinator for the County Wicklow Primary Healthcare. I'd like to thank Kathleen's daughter, Margaret, that was mentioned here this morning, and she is the absolutely, and I said it to her this morning, if people see the artwork, it's top notch. It's 10 out of 10.
Here, here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. I'd like to thank Anne Doon, again from the primary healthcare programme, but she also is a domestic violence worker as well within. I'd like to thank Susie McCarthy, and Susie makes the journey from Newcastle Road in Dublin, and she works with the the Traveller Council Service. I think it'll be the same way I'm putting it. Christy Morehouse, which is the manager of the DESH programme, Roisin Verdon, which is also working with the DESH programme as a full-time worker, Denise Cahill, which is our family support worker, and Denise of course has been a part-time worker from the Carrickmines siblings for the past 2.5, 3 years. I'd like to also thank Peter O'Reilly, Bip, I can call him, again for all of your support. Bip, thank you so much. I'd also like to thank Donald Costello. Donald Costello came in to this as a volunteer researcher. I'd like to thank him for his time, for his passion, and for commitment in getting this report finalised. I would also like to thank the following people within the HSE. I'd like to thank Charles Sherson, Engagement Officer. I'd also like to thank Dennis Sherlock, which is the Suicide Bereavement and Liaison Officer. Both have supported this report since the start. I would also like to thank within the HSE, the print and design people. I only have the first name, which is led by Shane. I'm sure the HSE people might know who he is, but he got us over the line and he produced this print document. Thank you so much. And I would also like to thank Linda. I'd like to thank you, Linda, for coming here today and launching this document that we share in a common way, and we hope that we will definitely work together in the very near future. And finally, I would like to thank Martina really, which can't make it here today, the Chief Officer, for her continued support for within the travelling community. And my last words are, now the journey begins. Thank you so much. We'll set us tea and coffee, and if you want to mingle for a few minutes, that's grand.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay?
That's great.
Thank you.